It's just only recently do we have enough people on the Supreme Court who have a textualist sensibility, who can look at a sentence that says you can't discriminate on the basis of race and think to themselves, maybe you can't discriminate on the basis of race? And then everyone says, oh, what? This is new.
Hello, Culminators. Welcome once again to a scorching summer here in Newark, New Jersey. I don't know where actually I'm speaking to Ivy Clegg but Ivy Clegg. That's what happens. You know what? It's not just you because you have a funny name. I have I have a mental block where I call Tucker Carlson Tucker.
Yeah. Well, Clegg is actually a last name, so
Right, that's right.
Yeah.
But
Right.
neither one of them is. Let's face it, they're both weird names.
Yep.
Clegg Ivey. Clegg Ivey is what a person with a certain kind of speech defect might call Craig Ivey.
Right. Right.
But in any event, you've never heard of him before. You almost certainly haven't. Although, as he's going to explain, darn it, people like him. We have a lot of friends in common. And, what Clegg is here to talk about is a little something. No, let me get to the right. A little something called Americans for Equal Opportunity. This is their
That's
website.
right.
It's a membership organization defending human and civil rights secured by law, protecting the rights of America. You can read this yourself. We're going to find out from Clegg how and why he got to AEO, why AEO is, if indeed it is, different from other organizations doing similar things. And hopefully he gets some members and raises some bucks and raises the profile of this organization. Things have really changed in this field. We'll talk about that. But Clegg, let me start out by asking you to introduce yourself and give us a little background.
Well, thanks. Look, it's an honor to be here addressing ColemanNation. Big fan. Love the show.
Thank you.
Again, like you said, my name's Clegg Ivey. I've been an attorney since the 90s, but I've done a lot of other things in that time. I was a tech entrepreneur, and then I was a professor. I actually taught at Tulane University and then Zhejiang University in China for a time, and then a sort of a local entrepreneur. So I've done a little bit of everything, and a lot of the little bit of everything that I've done involves hiring. I've been an employer. I've been a lawyer that advises employers. I've seen it from every angle. And in this case, what we're talking about today is specifically law firm employment, and we'll get to that. But of course, I was a law student trying to get a job at a firm, and then I was a lawyer at a big law firm trying to make my way. And so I know. Really, this whole subject matter is something I know a lot about, and it's informed by an entire career of coming at it from every different angle. So that's why I'm here today, to talk about discrimination in law firm hiring.
Obviously, you had the experience of being in law firms. You've had an interesting and seems like a decently successful career. So you were not the victim of discrimination. What was it that made you decide to get into a nonprofit effort like this?
Well, first of all, you can't really say, you can't really look at a person who's been successful and say, well, you weren't, obviously, because of your success, you weren't the victim of discrimination, because you and I both know that's not how the world works. I am certain that there are paths that have been closed to me over the years because I happen to be too white, too male, who knows, a number of other things. But that's not the point. And I think that's really important. I mean, not to sidetrack. I know we're talking about my background, and I definitely want everyone to know about, sort of how I came to this. But, the point here isn't that our members, those who've been discriminated against, can't succeed aren't successful won't go on to succeed. The point is that legally they should not have to overcome this discrimination, right? Whether or not they can and will eventually overcome it, we strongly believe in the power and the and the resilience of our members. But they shouldn't have to suffer this violation of the law. I mean, it's not right. It's not legal. And so you look at my career. I've been extremely lucky, and I've had a lot of different things that I've done that I think I've been successful. I'm happily married, and I live down here in Pensacola, Florida right now. You want to talk about heat? You don't even know, right? Don't get me started. But I get to go to the beach all the time. And in fact, Randy Barnett, who I know was recently on your show talking about his fantastic book. He and I, yeah,
Really is it really is. It's such an unusual book. First of all, I mean, how many law professors write their own memoirs? And he's a
it's
funny, a funny guy, a fun guy, a down-to-earth person, and yet
yeah,
he's so comfortable talking about his successes and his ambitions in a really straightforward way. Like like I heard to some extent my internal voice, but things I wouldn't necessarily say out loud.
hmm
Like I really wished I could have been at this. I really wanted an invitation from Northwestern because when it was a higher tier school
right,
than Kent.
right.
And of course it was.
It's the
And,
things we all know people are thinking, but but Randy will say it, and he has just a way of saying things. And this has been true throughout the time that I've known him. He is able to broach subjects that other people would find uncomfortable, and he just has this down to earth, straightforward way of saying, he'll ask a question like, "Well, is the Constitution racist? I don't know. Let's talk about it.
well, he
What's
also
going on?"
manages to be one of the few libertarians you can listen to.
Yes, and in the case of his book and the conversations that I've had with him, he's on the board at the New Civil Liberties Alliance, where I was for the last 5 years before leaving, specifically with the intent to start Americans for Equal Opportunity. And I got to work with Randy quite a bit, and I know that part of what this book does and part of what Randy does so well is talks about the legal movement, the conservative legal movement that really didn't exist in the 60s and 70s and came out of nowhere in the late 80s and is now one of the most, if not the most important movements of our time. And as a person who went to law school in the early 90s, I was just at the University of Chicago, no less. We were a part of that, but it was something that that Randy was part of the earliest stages of he experienced it as a legal scholar. So
I was in Chicago in between. I was in Chicago at
uh-huh.
Northwestern in between you and Randy. I was 85 to 88 at Northwestern.
All
But you
right,
so they had
Chicago
already.
squad represent.
That's right. Well, but that was why one went to Chicago in those days. I was an economics major, and I really
Yes.
wanted to go UC, but I didn't merit it. But Northwestern in those days, and my God, how things have changed, was very much affected by the law and economics movement. And Chicago, as in general, was known as a fairly conservative, small c, conservative um,
hmm
academic environment. We got great speakers, very often from the South Side, at our Federalist Society events, and I was chapter president. All right, you mentioned Randy. I don't want to get us off track. Yeah,
Sure.
that's my
Yeah, no, I actually, one of the reasons I really wanted to be on this podcast is some of my friends, Randy and then Ted Frank have been on your podcast. Ted is a long time, another Chicago connection, right? Chicago,
Right.
a couple years, right when he graduated, that's when I came in and we knew each other. He was clerking in Chicago right after he graduated. And then Mark Changizi is another guy who's been on your podcast that was a client of ours at NCLA, and I've had the privilege to work with him. So I really needed to get on your show so that
As
I
well,
could
so
keep
that
up
we
with the
could, so you
Joneses.
and so that we could meet, obviously, also.
Yeah, yeah. To circle back, I think the the reason that after all the years of doing all the hiring, and even at the New Civil Liberties Alliance, a conservative organization, it was my job to hire all the interns, all the clerks, sort of a whole, all the fellows, and hired hundreds over 5 years. I hired hundreds, or maybe almost 100 people, and interviewed hundreds more. And even at a firm like that, there is this weird institutional pressure to not make the not make the class or the cohort too white or too male or too this or too that. And if the pressure is that bad, if it exists even at a conservative organization, right? You can only imagine that how bad that pressure is at law firms, in corporate boardrooms. I have, as you do probably too, dozens, scores of friends who work at big law. They work at all of the firms that are in Exhibit A to our complaint before the EEOC. And these are. I mean, I could. If I don't know if I could read off all of the firms on our complaint in one breath, but if I did, it would be like that old Super Machines commercial from the '80s where the guy is talking really fast. It's an incredible list with all the all the sort of biggest firms. That's right, there it is. I mean, you've got Cravath on there, right? Debevoise, Gibson Dunn, and moreover, there are firms here that I have worked with and have friends at and would work with again. I mean, I was a summer associate at Paul Weiss back in the '90s. So these are not terrible places. The people who work there are not terrible people. They're great firms, and they have been led astray by this absolute gestalt that says that as long as you're helping someone, you can discriminate based on race. Now, you look at Title VII and you think, look, this couldn't be clearer. You cannot discriminate in hiring on the basis of, and then they list a bunch of things. One of them is race, national origin, etc. It couldn't be simpler, you would think. But they are all under the delusion that as long as you're doing it for a good cause, you can break the law. And no one thinks that helping out underprivileged minorities isn't a good cause. I mean, I was an underprivileged person of a different type. I grew up in a trailer, sort of typical Southerner. Neither of my parents had gone to college, and and
That's
I
something else we
played.
haven't. That's something else
Yeah,
we have in common. Not the trailer. I grew up in an apartment in Brooklyn,
yeah,
but
yeah.
so very unusual to me. People of power, our age, who are first generation college graduates who go to elite institutions. So that's actually another
Oh,
schism.
I got a full ride. Played football at Tulane, which is in New Orleans. And it's a good school, but it wasn't it's not an Ivy. I mean, we used to have shirts that said Tulane, the Harvard of the South, whatever. Um, but it
What does
was
it mean,
really
Harvard to the South?
everybody has them. But I did well. I had a 3.9 and a really really high LSAT, and all of a sudden I was looking at the possibility that I could go to any school I wanted. At the time, I was really into economics, just like you. And one of my professors, my thesis advisor, said, "Look, you need to be at the University of Chicago. That is the forefront of law and economics." And I was like, "I've never heard of the University of Chicago." I thought, what about Yale? What about Harvard? Or what Stanford? He said, "Look, apply to the Yale and Harvard, Stanford, sure. But if you get into Chicago," then I look, and Chicago is number 2 on the U.S. News and World Reports, and I was like, "Well, that ain't bad." Then I went up there, and I had a conversation with Richard Epstein,
Oh,
Uh,
well, Richard Epstein was one of our speakers.
yeah.
Maybe probably
So
more than once. What a character.
Richard Epstein, we could have 45 minutes and it wouldn't be enough, and I could do nothing but talk about Professor Epstein. I had a conversation with him when I was visiting, and at that point, I withdrew my applications to the other schools and signed on the dotted line with Chicago, and I went on to be his research assistant. And we are still friends even to this day. He's one of my mentors. And yeah, I ended up going into right out of law school. I went to Wilson Sonsini and worked on the Microsoft antitrust case. So that was I was very into the economics side of things during the early part of my career.
Yeah,
But that's
I took antitrust and advanced antitrust, and
such good stuff.
and then it went away. Then it seemed, I mean, I went to Case Scholler, which was an antitrust powerhouse, as my first
Hmm.
job. They had, they were known for their antitrust work on behalf of Texaco, and the aluminum cases, all the
Hmm.
great case, and it just all faded away in the 90s, as antitrust. You had the Microsoft case. Yeah, that was an
I mean, but
exception.
Microsoft was the outlier. Microsoft
Right.
was like the only, and in fact, I'll tell you this much: I was brought in to that team specifically because they didn't have a Chicago school economist. All they had were a bunch of Harvard school folks who were looking for any reason for the government to intervene. And what the
Oh,
team decided
interesting.
was we need a skeptic. We need somebody who's skeptical of government intervention. If we can convince this guy that there's a problem, and we got a case. And that was my role on the team. I was the gadfly. I was the person who said, "Nah, I'm not buying it." And
Interesting.
until I was so, but that was sort of the early part of my career, and it was out in Silicon Valley working with Paul Weiss, or not Paul Weiss, but Wilson Sonsini, that I got excited about entrepreneurial stuff, and then I left and started my first company in early 2000s, and I've been an entrepreneur and a general counsel of a dozen companies, since then, and like I said, I've seen it's funny in Silicon Valley. Here's what happens: you build the company you want to build. You start off with 5 or 6 people, and you're working around the clock, and you're excited, and you're filled with a mission. And then you get a little success, you raise a little bit of money, and then you start growing, and you get to that magic number, about 50 employees. And at 50 employees, that's when HR comes in and starts changing the company culture and telling you what you can and what you can't do. And I think there's a lesson there is that part of the reason that these firms are are violating the law is because they've got this culture that tells them if you don't have enough people of this color or that ethnicity, then you are implicitly there, and there's something wrong with you. And
You're
it's
doing
not.
something right. You're doing
Yeah, you're
something
doing something wrong, right? And you might be racist if you don't. If you don't have enough partners and enough associates. And let's talk for a minute about the forces on it, the pressures that exist. All right. So what you have is you have clients, right? Companies who hire these folks, who hire Debevoise and Jones Day and you name it. And they say to these folks, all right, you want our business? Great. We want to see lawyers of color on not just in your firm, right? Don't just give us a photo. We want to see lawyers of color working on our matters. And more than just, we don't want them just to be the low associates. We want to see a lawyer of color who's a partner on our matter, right? The requests, the demands, they keep getting more and more severe. Now, what the law firms should say to their clients is, listen, as your attorneys, we have to advise you that hiring and firing and recruiting on the basis of race is illegal under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. So maybe don't do that. Now that is what if somebody had just held the line and said, "Hey, look, I get where you're coming from, but that's illegal. Can't do it." But
But
that's not what they
it's a
did.
little, but this kind of culture doesn't arise from a bright shining moment. It is more like a boiled frog.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it is, well, we want to have outreach, we want to have affirmative action, we want to have opportunity, and then it becomes quotas.
Right.
And meanwhile, the same thing's going on at the client companies. And you know, in these white shoe firms, the clients that they're serving are used to, you know, they're people who are operating with lots and lots of zeros in everything they do.
Yep.
They're used to getting their way, but also as these processes are going on in those companies, first of all, outside counsel themselves are to a large extent, the beneficiaries of these policies,
Right.
and they're and those who are not themselves direct beneficiaries of these policies are hiring partners or executive committee members who want within their own social and professional circles to be known as progressive.
Right. So it's on top of all of that, I mean, you're absolutely right, Ron. On top of all of that, it is a self reinforcing mechanism. So I was having a conversation 2, 3 weeks ago with somebody who's on the hiring committee at a big firm, and this is what she told me. Listen, when we first started doing this stuff, she's been there for years. So when we first started doing this stuff, I thought, what can it hurt? They still have to come here and do the work, right? What can it hurt to give some folks a chance? They still got to sink or swim, right? We are still a meritocracy. This is insert firm that's very proud of how hard it is. You know, a few of those firms that in law school, it's like, oh, you want to go work for those guys? Oh boy, that's a grinder. And that's what she told me. She said, I thought, it'll work itself out. Well, years later, and she says it didn't work itself out. In fact, what ended up happening was some of these folks worked out great, like we knew they would, like they would have without these programs to help them. Those people would have been successful anyway. What happened was there were these other people that never would have gotten in the front door and could not cut it. But now, because we need to have a certain number of these people on the hiring committee, I'm looking around the table and I can't say so and so is a dud. We need to cut them loose. That one didn't work out. Because if I say that, I'm a racist. If I say that, I'm casting a doubt on our beautiful program. If I say that, every client that associate did billables for is going to say, "Hey, what just happened? You got rid of you got rid of our rainbow badge."
Not that the client is in any way letting you off the hook on results or performance or
Oh
diligence.
no,
You're expected to
no.
deliver the same level of quality that you would, even if. So I have someone I'm very friendly with in my community who got the brass ring, became a partner at a Wall Street firm, and after a couple of years, a couple of very well compensated years, but where he felt like a slave. But okay, that's the deal you make. But he
Yep.
left and
Yep.
went in house, and he told me we were bringing people, frankly unqualified people in for DEI reasons
Right.
at preposterous starting salaries. And I'm a young partner, and the decisions to take this course are being made by partners who are already approaching retirement age. They're not going to have to suffer the consequences. Right now, I am leading a team and I have to suffer the consequences of making
Right.
up for the lack of competence. But when I become when I'm on the executive committee in 20 years, what's going to be left of this practice? What's going to be left of our standards? I'm not interested in being part of that.
I and that is replicate that experience thousands of times across the law firm landscape. And this is a great segue. So, and let's look at all of the associates who aren't going to make partner all of the folks who are discriminated against because they're not part of that special club, right? Their skin pigmentation just doesn't match whatever the current gestalt says it should be, right? All of those people have been discriminated against. And let's go back to your partner friend and my friend on the hiring committee that says, look, there's no way for us to stop it once we make that. We let them in the door without having been qualified. Once we start discriminating against this person and favoring that person, it's really hard to stop. That's what's so insidious about what's going on with SEO and these law firms. Let me just paint a picture for you. Now you and I, we know how law school hiring and law firm hiring works. I don't think most Americans do. I don't think most people who aren't from the law, legal industry, understand that by the end of our second summer in law school, we have a job, and that we were offered that job basically as a result of not screwing up our summer internship between our second and third years.
All you have to demonstrate during that summer is that you're not unclubbable, not that you're clubbable, but that
Right.
you're not so socially off, and that you'll show up and that you can follow instructions. I mean, it's
Exactly.
not there's no real rigorous evaluation going on.
Exactly. So already it is the case that after your second year in law school, you spend a summer. Now, how did you get hired to spend that summer after your second year? Well, you had interviews at the beginning of your second year. So at that point, firms are making a decision about whether to bring you in for that next summer based on your 1L grades. Now, everybody
No, no,
knows
no, let me make it clear that what Clegg and I are talking about is, with all due respect to everyone else, the way it works in elite law schools.
yeah,
Okay, so we're talking about elite law firms and elite law schools, top 20 law schools, let's say, and there's
I
recruiting
think
going
I
in.
think T25 you still see
25.
this. Yeah,
Okay, right? 25 top law firms. Um, Very, very different world from what
right.
the vast majority of law school graduates go through. But this is the elite.
But these 40 firms, these 44 firms that we're bringing the action against, this is the process they use, right? So
Sure.
we're not suing like a friend of mine had a plaintiff's law practice for years, and he was a bulldog litigator and a great lawyer. But he came from a non T25 school, and he had to fight for everything he got, and he did not get the 2L internship route. But this is the route that these firms use. So what the normal process is, you get great grades during your first year. You write on to law review, and as a result, the top firms, the elite firms, the ones that we are bringing these actions against, they select you to come in for interviews, and then based on those interviews, you get a what's called a summer associate position during the summer. Now, that summer associate position pays you, in many cases, I made more money that summer than I had in my entire life combined up to that point. I mean, I was a poor kid, and it was crazy.
Usually, it's the same salary on a pro rata basis as first year
Right,
lawyers who've
right.
passed the bar and finished 3 years of law school.
Yeah, and you spend and what happens is it's exactly like you say. As long as you don't accidentally kill the named partner's dog, or do
Steel's
something.
car.
Yeah, steal his car, do something similar, or her car, right? You just, as long as you don't do something like that, you're going to be brought back. They're going to say at the end of the summer, this is great, worked out great. We'd like for you to come and work for us full time when you graduate. And that is how it normally works at these. And again, I think it's important to remind everyone at the top law schools that feed into these top term firms. These are the firms that we are going after. Now, what this program sets up. Well, first of all, in recent years, in the last 10 or 15 years, a new thing has come along, which is that people are getting summer associate opportunities after their first year, so a summer earlier. And we've seen that, and we've seen, there's an interesting thing happening here where certain folks who are parts of certain groups are actually getting, and they get the money and they get the offer to come back. So that's 1 year sooner, and we've seen that over the last 10 years. But what SEO does, and I just couldn't believe it when I found out about it, what they do is they pick people based on the color of their skin and who've never taken a single law school class. They are not in law school yet, right? And they give them an internship, and they place them at one of these top firms, one of the 44 firms that we've named in our EEOC complaint. And those young people who've never taken a single law school class, they spend the summer, they get just as much money as if they were a 2L summer associate, and they get an invite to come back for a 1L summer associate gig. Now, you and I both know where that 1L summer associate gig leads. It leads to 90+% of the people that go through this end up working for the firm after they graduate. And the 10% that don't, it's because they wanted to do something else, either go to a different firm or become a professor or something else. It's not because those 10% aren't given offers. Almost everyone who goes is given an offer.
And I don't think we said SEO is sponsors for educational opportunity.
Right. Now, what this means is that firms like those listed, they are hiring people who they don't know. All they know is that they have to have at least a 3.3 GPA and at least a 154 LSAT.
This is 3.3 in college.
In college, yeah.
College right. In the 21st century.
How? Yeah, exactly.
3.3, folks. Okay,
yeah,
that's a B plus average. That's what we used to call, when I was in college, a football player average. By the way, my average was lower, but my average was old money.
Oh, my job at Tulane was to bring the GPA of the football team up. So yeah, trust me, I was doing a lot of heavy lifting. So what the firms are doing is they are outsourcing the actual discriminatory selection process to SEO. SEO says, hey, Jones Day, just come on over here, man. I got some premium product for you. I've got a bunch of people who are going to go to top law schools, and they have this GPA and they have this LSAT score, and they are the right color. They look exactly like you want them to look. And the firms say, well, great. And what happens? Well, it's the same thing that happens with my friend on the hiring committee. It doesn't matter whether they can hack it. Once they're in the pipeline, they can't. No firm is going to kick them out of the pipeline. They can't afford to kick them out of the pipeline.
What's the value added? Why this has been part? Anyone who goes to a law firm website for these the main thing law firm websites for elite law firms do is recruit, because they're not getting clients for multi-billion-dollar engagements, mergers and acquisitions, initial public offerings from their website. It's all relationship based, and that's fine.
Right.
But these are recruiting brochures, and they make sure that, just like all advertising in America today, that if white people aren't the minority faces represented there, so they're already deep into the marketing,
right,
and the recruit. So what's the value added here? What are they gaining by?
So one of the things you have to understand is, first of all, the firms are doing a lot of things, and one of the things they're not doing yet is recruiting on college campuses. They're just not.
Well,
in many cases,
historically, they haven't.
Right. But that's who SEO is targeting. They are what they're basically doing is pointing the recruiting nozzle earlier in the development process and promising the firms, look, you don't have to spend a bunch of money doing a thing you've never done, targeting a market you don't understand, and which basically, honestly, targeting kids that despise you because you're big law. The firms have this big problem. A lot of the people that they're so what does SEO do? SEO couches it as a prestigious internship. It's like a fellowship or a scholarship. It's something. It's a thing that you win, and it comes with all this money, right? And sure, you have to go to the firm, but I'm not even in law school yet. What can I be? What can I possibly be expected to actually do? What could I possibly be held accountable for, other than representing my skin color well in a corporate environment? And so that's how. And the firms know, first of all, that if SEO is the one out there, it's like laundering the discrimination, right? SEO is the one discriminating against our clients, right? And on behalf of the firms. So our clients get weeded out, and these other folks get handed this, a sinecure. They get handed this great thing, and of course, down the road.
Which let me interrupt you again. You see, I'm very good at that. But if you there's so many things to, and here we're already 45 minutes into it, but these are not sinecures for everyone else. Okay?
Nope.
I failed miserably as a big law associate, and I think demonstrated subsequently that I'm a half decent lawyer. But succeeding in a big law firm is a brutal
Yeah.
way of life. A lot of things have to go right, including your attitude and your preparation, and also your social preparation. And coming from families like ours is not good preparation for succeeding
Right.
in a
Oh, not at
corporate law
all.
firm.
Nope.
So, but if you're specially privileged because your mere existence on the roll is considered by someone a value added proposition, it's a great place to be.
Absolutely. And the I hear from people who don't like what we're doing. I hear, well, there've always been privileged pipelines, right?
For sure.
People. I mean, you and I probably both went to school with students whose one or both parents were
Yeah.
lawyers. I think I went to school with like Harvey Mansfield's daughter. It was very intimidating. And I was like, well, my dad is a lineman who puts up phone lines after rainstorms, and my mom is secretary. And they both work for the phone company their whole life, and that's who I am. So I don't know anything about the corporate game. But it doesn't matter that there have always been privileged pipelines. As a guy who benefited from a scholarship money that was designed for underprivileged folks, I'm happy that economic disparities can be taken into account. But I'm sorry, the law is very clear. You can't just privilege one race over another. You can't do it. It's illegal.
The law has become more clear. To be fair, right? In the Supreme Court, in the Friends of Harvard University, finally drew the line.
So you're absolutely right. I want to argue with you. I want to say, doggone it, the law has always been clear, but
only in the sense that if you read the statute, it's pretty obvious what it says.
Right. The law has always been clear. The text has always been unambiguous. It's just only recently do we have enough people on the Supreme Court who have a textualist sensibility, who can look at a sentence that says you can't discriminate on the basis of race and think to themselves, maybe you can't discriminate on the basis of race. And then everyone says, oh, what? This is new. But you are absolutely right. As a matter of the way the law will be interpreted after that case, things are more clear now. Even though you and I both know it was clear all along, doggone it.
Exactly.
So that's the pipeline. That is the insidious practice that we are challenging. Let's bring it all back to what Americans for Equal Opportunity is about. Our clients had the 3.3 GPA. Our clients had the 154 or better LSAT. Our clients had exactly the same merits, if you exclude the pigment of their skin, as the people who were privileged with this. And our clients got dinged. Our clients got locked out of this pipeline.
How'd you
And
find them? How'd you find them?
well, the question isn't how do we find them, because they're everywhere. They're at every school. There are dozens or hundreds. The real question is, how do we get any of them to agree to actually be a part of this? Ask yourself, what happens to someone who stands up against discrimination in law firm hiring? This person wants to be a lawyer. They want to go and work at a firm like a Paul Weiss or a Debevoise or Freshfields, that they would love to have that kind of career. Do you think every single person that we talked to said, "Oh yeah, it's a horrible problem"? I was totally. I mean, we had a hard time getting people to even agree, to be members, because they were worried that our membership roll was going to get doxxed, and that that they were going to be found out, and so even to get people to sign on anonymously as members has been difficult. They are everywhere, Ron, everywhere. It's just a matter of the few who are either stubborn enough or sort of risk preferring. I like folks who are willing to take a little gamble. And these are brave people. Our members are doing all of their classmates and all of their peers an incredible service. And I say, even the people who are right now benefiting from this discrimination aren't really benefiting. I mean, you and I could talk probably for another 3 hours about the terrible impact of these kinds of programs over time on not just the people that are discriminated against, but the people who they're proposed to help. But that's got to be a subject for a different time. Good Lord.
So right now, this is your case. This is the one case, the first case. But it was kind of interesting to me to think that you built Americans for Equal Opportunity to handle these specific kinds of cases, because then I would understand how you differentiate yourself from, again, like what Bill Jacobson does, and there are a handful of other people who do these kinds of complaints. But this happens to just be your first case. What's the thinking? Why didn't you just join up? I mean, after all, before you had been with the American,
with NCLA,
right?
Yeah,
so
New Civil Liberties Alliance.
Why not just do this as a project through them?
Well, I mean, so first of all, I think you take an organization like NCLA, and they've got a very distinct idea of their value add and what it is they're going after. Now, for them, it happens to be the administrative state, right? So all of their everyone they sue is an agency. It's whether it's the SEC or the FDA, you name it. It's an agency that has violated someone's constitutional rights. So a Title VII complaint before the EEOC against private actors, just not even in their ballpark, right? Despite the fact that I'm sure if I were to talk to the folks at NCLA about what I'm doing, they might be perfectly fine with it. Now, there are other folks who have brought, like the folks that brought Ed Bloom and the folks that brought that Harvard case that you mentioned. There are people that are doing some of this, and what we have a secret sauce, which is that most of the people I am working with are younger than I am, much younger, and they are recent. They're recent experiencers of this situation, and I think being new and lean and young and hungry makes us fearless. Now, you know what we don't have that, say, someone like NCLA has? I don't have 6 relationships with firms that do pro bono work for me that I rely on, because if they don't do the pro bono work, I can't manage the caseload that I'm managing because I'm an appellate I'm basically an boutique, and sometimes you need to actually have the district court litigation happen, and that's when you work with. You work with somebody like a Sidley or a Jones Day, or Gibson. Well,
They're not gonna help you.
guess what? Guess what
Right.
I'm going to lose if I'm an organization that already has those people working for me and I sue 44 different firms. I am torching the earth. I'm screwed. But Americans with equal opportunity can do it. We don't care, right? I don't have any relationships that I can't torch. So that's part of what we're up to is that we're taking an opportunity and advantage of this moment in time when the world is a bit saner and we've got somebody at EEOC who thinks that what we're doing is correct and this is important, Ron, that maybe can crack the whip on the careers and get them to actually do their jobs and do the right thing. I so far, knock on wood, we've been very lucky. The people that are working on this are seem to be great and don't seem to be hamstringing us. But as a person who fought the administrative state for the last X number of years, I was like, I was waiting.
All right, so you just made a perfect segue for me for the last thing I wanted to ask you about, which was you described your career path. Basically, you're a tech entrepreneur, so you had taken your legal education and done as a lot of enterprising people, and like myself did, which was make some nice money getting involved in the Silicon Valley scene and
Hmm.
not really being a lawyer, or if you're being a lawyer, you're using your legal background to help you evaluate deals and that sort of thing. Not a litigator.
Nope. Not after. I mean, I was a litigator when I was practicing,
Right.
but
So
I
that's
haven't. Yeah,
that is an unusual track. Usually litigators don't go in that direction because we don't
it's
tend
usually
to
the
have to.
corporate. It's usually the
Right.
corporate guys. Yeah.
Yeah. So how the hell did you do that?
Well, part of it was being in Silicon Valley. Part of it was working on the two cases that defined my career, the early part of my career, the Microsoft antitrust case and the very first MP3 case. So the Recording Industry of America sued the Diamond Multimedia Systems, the makers of the very first little MP3 player. They said it was an infringing device; it was illegal, and we took that all the way to the Ninth Circuit and won. And because of that, MP3s were not infringement. MP3 players, your iPad, your iPod, all that stuff now
You argued it
exists.
was basically a Betamax for music.
Oh, I got to tell you, we did the Sony Betamax dance right on up to the Ninth Circuit, and they bought it. They loved it. But all of my clients, the people that I worked with, my job on those things was A, to work with the economists, and B, because I was a computer programmer, my job was to work with all of the engineers to help us understand. Part of the Microsoft case was understanding what's so bad about them not documenting their APIs. What's so bad about them not extending licenses to the tools makers? And these were highly technical questions, not just economics wise, but tech wise. And so I spent all this time. I spent years building relationships with engineers, programmers. I met
And
Steve
really
Jobs and
understanding the business and the technology.
totally understanding it. And then when I got an opportunity, I jumped ship. Started my first. We raised, I don't know, 5 million after 3 months, and we raised another 75 million by the end. Back then, money was just flying. We go down to Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley and hit a tree, and a VC would fall out of it, with a bag of cash. So it was easier then. I'll tell you that.
I'm sure it was. We could go on all day. Fantastic chat, Clegg. I'm really glad I got to know you. I got to know about what you're doing. People are going to have a hard time relating to what we're talking about, as you pointed out. It's right. It's a thin strip of the legal profession, but in fact, what your point is that people for no good reason are being denied entry into that thin strip who would make it based on merit if not for programs like this. And whether or not, I mean, neither one of us stayed in that environment, and it's really a brutal environment in many respects, but it can be a a platform for all kinds of career opportunities. But I'm so glad that you pointed something out at the very beginning when I talked to you about you seem to have had a professional, a successful professional career. You can look at someone and say you've had a professional, I don't like professional and successful. I have a mental block there, but you don't know what opportunities they were deprived of. I will tell you that I was taken off a big case at a large New Jersey firm early in my career because the client had a facility. I was a litigator. I was doing toxic tort litigation, and the client had a facility in Georgia. And as part of my work, I had gone down there to talk to former employees at the facility, and for purposes of
Right.
it was a coverage case. And the word came back from from the guy, in-house counsel in that division in Atlanta. Do you is not essentially, do you really have to send the Jew down to talk to our good old boys because they don't really, he's kind of scaring them a little bit. I don't know what it was. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the same Ron Coleman, but I guess the New Jersey, the aggressive, I don't know, whatever it was, I was taken off that case.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
taken off that case, subsequently had trouble making my hours in that firm and had to make changes in my career. Now, frankly, that was illegal. But you know what, folks? When your bread is buttered on a certain on certain, like, that was my firm. That was where I thought I was going to have a career, and I thought I could make the best of it.
Well, look at your firm. They were responding to client pressure,
Exactly. Exactly.
which is exactly what we're talking about here. I will say this. Look, it's been a pleasure to talk with you and to get to know
Same
you a
here.
bit. Um, and I know you're right. It is a thin sliver, and people are going to have a hard time. Some people, anyway, are going to have a hard time, sort of caring. But I will say this: that these firms that we have identified, they are a part of this firmament. They are a part of this larger system that absolutely robs all Americans of their sort of equal rights and equal opportunities. There is a narrative driven, and it's the kind of thing that the current administration is trying to fight against. And I know this is maybe this is not the beaches of Normandy, but I think this is an important side mission that absolutely does degrade the enemy's ability to continue to break the law and act as if they are above the law. Because you know what, Ron, if they can violate this law and do so openly on their websites, yay, we have quotas, woohoo! If they can break this law, as long as feel like they have a good reason, they can break any law, and
And
they are.
they are, and they will continue to be.
Yeah.
And
We've got to
Clegg,
stop them.
you're doing the right thing. Great talking to you. Thanks for culminating along with us today, and we will be in touch.
Thanks, Ron.
Thanks.